I never expected my life to shrink to the size of a suitcase at 72, but that's what happens when the people you raised decide you've become a burden. They didn't say it exactly like that. Children rarely do. My daughter, Claire, used softer words, the kind you use to move an elderly neighbour into assisted living without feeling guilty. Mum, you'd be safer with professionals. You forget things sometimes. The stairs are dangerous. We just want what's best for you. My son Daniel stood behind her, silent, like a man guarding a decision already made. I looked at the two people I fed, clothed, defended, taught, and I finally understood the rule no one warns you about. You can give your children the world, but the world will teach them to forget the hands that gave it. They gave me 1 hour to pack a bag, to rest in a facility they'd already paid a deposit for. Daniel carried my suitcase to the car like it weighed nothing. I carried something far heavier, humiliation so sharp I could taste iron. When we pulled up to the facility, I knew immediately I wouldn't survive there. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was designed for one thing, to keep old people quiet. Neutral walls, fake smiles, plastic plants that never die, unlike the people inside. I stayed 2 nights. On the third, as I lay awake listening to the muffled beeping of someone else's heart monitor down the hall, a thought bloomed inside me, slow, steady, poisonous like a late frost. They think I'm finished. They think I'm weak. They think this is the end of my story. It wasn't. I left before sunrise, without telling anyone, taking only my purse and the little dignity I still had. The taxi driver asked, "Where to, Mum?" I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing: I would never let my children decide my ending. I would return, not to beg, not to fight, but to win, quietly, precisely, and in a way they'd never see coming. Because the cruelest revenge is not destruction, it's revelation. Making someone look in the mirror long enough to finally see the monster wearing their face, and I knew exactly where to begin. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. Someone my children prayed I'd forgotten. Someone who knew every secret my family tried to bury. And when she answered, her voice was the same as the day she betrayed me. "Evelyn?" she said. "Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes," I whispered. "It's finally time." Her name was Margaret Hale. Once, she was my closest friend. Then she became the reason my marriage fell apart. My children hated her long before they hated me. She answered the phone like she'd been waiting for my call for 2 decades. "Evelyn, you sound different." "I am," I said. "I need somewhere to stay. 1 week, maybe 2. She didn't hesitate. She never did. "Come over, I'll put coffee on." Coffee, as if we were still women in our 40s, laughing over secrets and burning casseroles. But when I stepped into her house, God, it smelled the same. Cinnamon and lies. Her hair had gone silver, her face softer, but her eyes, still sharp enough to read a soul. "You look like hell," she said gently. "I was kicked out by my own children. That'll age anyone." She blinked. For once, she didn't have a witty comeback. "Sit," she said. "Tell me everything." And for the first time since the door closed behind me, I did. Every insult hidden inside polite concern. Every decision made for my safety. Every boundary crossed with a smile. Margaret listened the way only someone who already hated your children can. When I finished, she set her cup down with a click. "So, they finally did it. Finally," I repeated. She sighed. "Evelyn, you raised them too gently. They learned to take advantage of that gentleness a long time ago." I wanted to deny it. I truly did. But she was right. Claire had always assumed I'd drop everything for her. Daniel had viewed me less like a mother, more like a resource. And both had inherited their father's talent for rewriting history in their favour. Margaret leaned forward. "Tell me what you want. Do you want your home back? Do you want them to kneel? Do you want them to understand what they've done?" Her eyes gleamed. "Or do you want something quieter?" "Quieter," I said. "Much quieter." She smiled slowly. "Good. Quiet is where I thrive." Margaret and I began with information, not confrontation. Revenge, she always said, is just truth with good timing. And we had plenty of truth to work with. First, Claire and her husband were deeply in debt, something they'd hidden beautifully behind Instagram smiles and staged family photos. Second, Daniel had married a woman who viewed me as undesirable clutter, and she made sure Claire agreed. Third, my home, the one they pushed me out of, was still legally mine. Because while my children were many things, they were also sloppy. The house transfer papers they'd prepared, unsigned, folded neatly in a drawer as if waiting for me to obediently agree. I almost laughed, but Margaret did laugh, sharp and delighted. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, "you're sitting on a gold mine." "I don't want money." "That's why you'll win." We began visiting, not the obvious kind, not the dramatic, "How could you do this to me?" kind. No, we visited the people around my children, the neighbours, the pastor's wife, Claire's co-workers, Daniel's gym friends, their children's school principal, not with accusations, with concern. "I'm worried they're overwhelmed," I'd say softly. "They insisted I stay in that facility. I'm sure they meant well. I'm afraid they're struggling more than they admit. I don't want anyone to think poorly of them. They're just making difficult choices." Concern is a scalpel. It cuts reputation far deeper than anger ever could. Margaret, meanwhile, reached out to someone Daniel dreaded, his wife's mother, a woman who lived for appearances, a woman who thought her daughter had married down, a woman who would rather swallow glass than be associated with a son-in-law accused of abandoning his elderly mother. When Margaret told her the story, carefully spun, devastatingly polite, the woman's face went rigid. "She kicked you out?" she asked, voice trembling with quiet fury. "She allowed that? My daughter?" Margaret touched her hand. "I'm sure it was Claire's influence. Claire always was, forceful." It was a masterstroke. Blame was now circulating without a clear source, and guilt. Guilt spreads like mold in families built on image. A week later, Claire called me. "Mom," she asked, voice tight, "why did the church call asking if I needed emotional support?" "Oh dear," I said. "I only told them you were under a lot of pressure. I didn't realize they'd reach out." She exhaled sharply. "And why?" she continued. "Did Emily's school counsellor ask if everything is okay at home?" "Isn't it?" Silence. Then, "Mum, people are talking." "I'm sure they mean well," I said gently. The seed was planted. Daniel called next. "Mum, did you tell Karen's mother we threw you out?" "I said I felt unwanted. Isn't that what happened?" Long pause, a swallow. "That's not fair," he said. We thought it was best." "Did you?" I whispered. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full of something cracking. Margaret leaned back one evening and said, "You know what makes this work? You're not lying. You're simply letting the truth walk around without a leash." And she was right. I didn't accuse my children. I didn't slander them. I didn't scream. I just let people see. And people reacted. Their pastor visited them. "So," he said kindly, "how is your mother adapting?" They froze. He continued, "You must be heartbroken about the distance between you." Distance. He didn't say abandonment, but he didn't need to. Claire later called me sobbing. "Mum, everyone thinks we're monsters." "What do you think you are?" I asked quietly. She broke, and somewhere in that breaking, the first real remorse appeared. Not because they missed me, but because they hated being watched. People who push elders away rely on silence, so I took silence from them. It happened on a Tuesday. My children arrived at Margaret's house, both pale, tense, and humiliated. Their kids stood behind them, confused. "Mom," Claire said, "please come home." I sipped my tea. Why? That word is a hammer. Because we handled things poorly. "And?" "You didn't deserve that," Claire whispered. Daniel stepped forward. "We're sorry, truly, please come back." I looked at them, really looked. Two adults who believed parenthood ends when their parents become inconvenient. Two people who had built a life on curated images and good optics. And now, here they were, in the house of the woman they despised most, begging me to return because the world was finally looking at them the way I once did, with disappointment. I set my cup down. I will come home, I said, but not to be used, not to be hidden, not to be managed. What does that mean? Daniel asked. It means, I said softly, from now on, the door swings both ways. That night, as I packed my things, Margaret handed me a file folder. This, she said, is the part you decide tomorrow. Do you want justice or do you want change? Inside that folder was something that could alter my children's lives forever, legally, financially, psychologically. It was the kind of choice that defines a character. And I had one more lesson to teach my children. A mother's forgiveness is not owed, it is earned. The folder Margaret handed me was thick, not with gossip, not with malice, with options. And options are power, the kind my children never expected me to hold. Inside were 3 different paths. 1. Legal documents papers that would ensure I remain the sole owner of my home. Neither child could make financial decisions on my behalf. Any attempt to relocate me without consent would become criminal coercion a shield. 2. A drafted letter addressed to their workplaces, detailing their concerns about my safety and their decision to remove me from my home. It wasn't accusatory, it was factual. A mirror. 3. A will not finalised but detailed. In Margaret's handwriting, a distribution plan for everything I owned, 60% to a charity supporting elderly independence, 30% to the grandchildren directly, 10% divided between Claire and Daniel. If they adhered to specific behavioural conditions over the next 3 years, a consequence. I stared at the pages, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Margaret watched me quietly. What do you want, Evelyn? She asked. Punishment or transformation? Both, I said, but not the way she meant. When I walked back into my house, I felt something inside me shift. The air was familiar, but the energy was different, not warm, not hostile, just waiting. Claire hovered near the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands. Mum, let me... I can walk, I said gently. Daniel moved to help bring in my bags. No, I said. You two sit, we need to talk. The words hit them harder than anything I could have screamed. We sat in the living room, the same room where they'd told me I was unsafe in my own home. I placed the folder on the coffee table. This, I said, is what comes next. Their shoulders tightened. I opened the first section, the legal protections. From now on you cannot move me, sign anything for me, make living decisions for me, or interfere with my finances. I am not dependent. I am not fragile. I am not a burden you are allowed to manage. Claire stared down at her hands. Daniel swallowed hard. I continued, opening the second section, the drafted letter. I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to punish you publicly. But you need to understand exactly how close you came to crossing a line that ruins people's reputations forever. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They already knew. Then I opened the final section, the will. Their faces drained of colour. Mom, Claire whispered. I raised a hand. No, you listen. You made a decision that changed the way I see you, so I will make a decision that changes the way you behave. I slid the document toward them. You have not lost your inheritance. Not yet. But it will no longer be automatic. It will be earned. Daniel looked up sharply. Earned? How? I tapped the page. You will visit, not every day, but regularly. You will include me, not hide me. You will treat me with respect, not convenience. You will not speak about me as if I am gone while I'm still here. I leaned back. And if you fail, I will sign this version tomorrow. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Claire broke first. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and hot. I'm so ashamed, she whispered. We thought we were doing the right thing. We thought. She shook her head. No, no excuses. We hurt you. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. I didn't realize how much I let my wife steer things, he admitted. That's not an excuse either. It's my failure. I thought I was protecting my family. I didn't realize I was destroying the part of it that made us a family. They weren't crying because they loved me, not yet. They were crying because they finally saw themselves, and that is far more powerful. People don't change from guilt, they change from recognition. For the next month, I observed them the way a gardener watches frost, quietly, carefully, without sentiment. And slowly, painfully slowly, they changed. Claire started stopping by in the evenings, not to check on me, but to sit with me. We talked, we laughed carefully at first, then naturally. She started confessing things she'd never told me, her anxiety, her fear of being a bad mother, her exhaustion pretending her life was perfect. Her vulnerability was small at first, like a shy animal. But I never chased it, and that's why it kept returning. Daniel took longer. Men always do, but one night he arrived without calling, holding takeout from my favourite diner. He sat quietly at the table before finally saying, I don't know how to fix this, Mom, but I want to. Begin, I said simply. So he did. Small things. Mowing the lawn without being asked, replacing light bulbs, helping with groceries, calling me, instead of texting tiny stitches in a torn fabric. Not enough yet. But movement. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A Saturday morning knock. Daniel opened the door. Standing there was the administrator from the facility, the one my children had placed me in. Her expression was neutral but curious. Is Evelyn home? She asked. Daniel froze. Claire appeared behind him. I stepped into view. Yes, I said. She lives here. The administrator nodded. I just wanted to check if your children still needed the placement. We have a long waiting list. Claire's face burned pink. Daniel's ears went red. No, Claire said quickly. No, she's home. She's part of our life. The administrator nodded politely. Good. I'm glad to see families supporting their elders. As she left, Daniel shut the door and leaned his forehead against it. God, he muttered. That's what we looked like, didn't we? People who dumped their mother at the first inconvenience. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. He already knew. And shame, real shame, sticks. Weeks passed. I didn't rush. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish. Instead, I taught them what they had forgotten, how to love someone who is still alive. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they learned. Not perfectly, not quickly, but earnestly. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was justice. And then one evening, Daniel asked the question I'd known would someday come. Mom, will you change the will back? I looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then I said, No. His eyes widened. Why? Because this version makes you better, and I won't take that away from you. He sat down slowly, and for the first time in his life, he understood me. My children did not just become better children, they became better people. Not because I demanded it, but because I held up a mirror long enough for them to see the truth. Neglect ages the parent, but it rots the child. And some rot can be cut away if you act fast enough. Months later, Claire hugged me, not a polite hug, but the kind she used to give when she was a girl afraid of thunderstorms. Daniel fixed a leaky pipe without being asked and joked, Don't tell anyone, it'll ruin my reputation. And one quiet afternoon, my granddaughter asked me, Grandma, why did Mommy cry when she brought you home? I smiled softly. Because she remembered who I am.